I think I explained that pretty well. So in today's video, I'm going to cover a near miss that happened during my time on the Cuyahoga with a sailboat while I was trying to get under the Blue Water Bridge. Now, the video I'm going to reference is from StreamTime Live. Now, they run a bunch of live cameras around the Great Lakes that you can watch the ships going up and down the rivers. In this specific video, there is about 500,000 views, and there is just so many people saying in the comments that the ship, me, had to give way to the sailboat. Now, for all of you thinking that I had to give way to the sailboat, you need to watch my video from last week explaining why sailboats don't always have the right of way. In fact, in this instance, I had the right of way. Sailing vessels and vessels of less than 20 meters should not impede the passage of commercial traffic in this area, or larger vessels, right? So vessels that can only safely travel within the confines of the channel. So in this instance, I most definitely had the right of way over the sailboat. You can see from the video, and we're going to get into this, that he may not have been aware of how much current he was going to encounter going around this turn. But luckily, no one was hurt, no one was injured, there was no collision, and everybody got to go home at the end of the day. So that means everything went just about as well as I could have hoped. All right, so before we really get into this video, there's one concept I want to explain very well here. The difference between the ship's heading, or a boat's heading, and the course over ground. Now, just because a boat or a ship is pointed in one direction does not mean that that is the direction that it's going. Ships are affected by two main factors. One being the wind. So the wind will blow you whatever way it's blowing that day. And the second one is the current, or the movement of the water. Now, the water will push the boat one way, and the wind will push the boat another way. Sometimes they work together, and sometimes they don't. In this case, the sailboat was very much affected by the current of the water. Now, because it was moving so slowly, the difference between the boat's heading, the sailboat's heading, and the course over ground was very large. The faster that you move through the water, the closer the heading and the course over ground will get to. So in order to explain this concept just a little bit more, I'm going to use this compass rose that I have on my iPad here, and we're going to draw on it. So wind, when it's reported, always comes from a direction to you. So the wind is coming from the north, or it's out of the south. So it's coming from a direction to you. Current, the movement of the water, is opposite. So the current will always go from you in the direction of the current. So if you have a northerly current and a northerly wind, they're working opposite each other. If you have a north wind and a south current, they are moving together. I know it's strange, and people smarter than me have decided this long before I came around, but that's how it works. So on this compass rose, I'm going to use a couple different colors to signify different aspects of what I'm talking about. So we're going to use red as the course over ground. Yellow will be the ship's heading. Blue will be the current, and green will be the wind. Okay, so just to make everything easy, we'll turn this ruler on. So just to keep things easy, I'm going to have us move, or have us heading in a northerly direction. So the ship's going to be pointed north. So I've got my ruler lined up here with north, and I'm just going to take it, and I'm going to draw from the center of the compass rose, which is the assumed position of the vessel, and I'm going to make a mark from the middle to the north. There we go. So there's our northerly heading. So yellow will be the heading. Next, I'm going to draw the current. So let's, for argument's sake, say we have an easterly current. So the current is going to be going from the center to the east. And I'm going to use blue to signify this. Blue will be current. All right, let's get our marker back. Make him blue. So we have an easterly current. So the current is going this way. Move that ruler down. And it is pushing the ship to the east because it is an easterly current. So let's have let's do the wind next. The wind, I said, was going to be green. So we have green wind. So the wind, let's say we have a northwesterly wind. So we'll just take our ruler, line it up with the northwest. There's 45. And we are going to make this green. Remember, wind comes from the direction to us. So the wind is going to be coming in this direction. And the barbs on the end of the vector here, on the ecdis or whatever sensor you're using, has a specific meaning. Half a barb is 5 knots, a full barb is 10, and a flag is 50. So we're going to say that we have, how much do we want to have? 20 knots? 20 knots is pretty reasonable. So we're going to have 2 barbs coming off the end of the wind vector like this. All right, so the current is pushing us to the east. So the ship pointed north is going to be moving to the east bodily with the water. The wind is out of the northwest. So we have a northwesterly wind. So it's not exactly on the beam, but it will be pushing us also to starboard bodily. Just because the ship's moving doesn't mean the wind affects it any less. As the ship gains speed in the water, we have what's called a, what's it called now? Relative wind. So the wind relative to our movement, and that's not the same as the true wind. The true wind is always going to be acting on the ship. So you can imagine if a car is driving down the road, if the wind is perpendicular to the road, it doesn't matter where on the road that is, it's going to be acting perpendicular to the car. However, if the car moves fast enough, even though the wind is perpendicular to the car, the relative wind, or the wind felt by the car, is going to be coming from ahead. So there's 2 different things there, relative and then true. So the true wind is going to be out of the northwest, and so that's going to be pushing us slightly to the east. So we have the wind pushing us to the east and the current pushing us to the east. The resultant vector, so our course over ground, which is the true movement of the ship relative to the surface of the earth, is going to be, let's maybe not so much there, maybe, well, we'll exaggerate it a little bit. So we'll say, even though we're going north, we're moving in a northeasterly direction like this. So the course over ground, the vector, as it's commonly referred to in the shipping world, the vector is a prediction based on past information. So how the vector is generated is the GPS will take a series of past positions and times. So it needs to know a time and position, and it'll take a series of them depending on how you set your time interval in the GPS, and then it'll make a projection on where the ship will be based on this past information. So depending on how long or short your time interval is, that'll depend on whether you have a very steady vector or a vector that washes up and down. The shorter the time interval, the more likely the vector is to move around. The longer the time interval, the more likely it is to steady. Well, the benefits to having the long time interval is that you have a pretty good idea which way the ship's going. The downside to that is that if you change direction or there is a change in wind or current, it's the amount of time that it takes for it to show up in the vector is longer. If you have a short time interval, you're going to have a vector that moves around a lot. However, when things change, say you turn the ship or there's a change in wind or current, it will react faster to show you the new estimated position line. So there we go. This is how the forces affect a ship that is on a northerly heading with a northwest wind and an easterly current. So we would expect the ship to be setting, which is the term used to describe the difference between the ship's head and the course over ground. It would be setting to starboard. All right, so let's get into what happened when I had that near miss with this sailboat. I'm going to be watching the video as per StreamTime Live. I'm going to put the link down in the description so you can follow along. I'm going to be putting a few snippets here and there of what I'm seeing and what's actually going on. All right, so this is the video. You can see in the search bar, did Cuyahoga sailboat. I am going to put the link down in the video description. This video, it's not in what I recorded here, but it's got nearly 500,000 views. And there was a lot of people saying the sailboat had the right of way and I had no business doing what I was doing. When in reality, if you go back to my video from last week talking about how sailboats don't always have the right of way, it's very clear that this guy was getting in my way and not me getting in his way. So let's hit play here. StreamTime Live. Yeah, StreamTime Live is great. They got cameras. StreamTime Live is great. They have cameras up and down the Great Lakes in various areas. Port Huron, Marine City. There's one at Algonac. They have a new one in Port Colborne. And anytime I go by one of these cameras, I always try to get out onto the wing of the ship and wave or blow the whistle. So if you do end up tracking me and you see me going by, pull up one of the cameras because I usually go out and wave to everybody. It's actually really neat. So here we are. So just to give you a little bit of background, this is, I'm going to put a picture up here. This is at the turn going upbound under the Blue Water Bridge. So I am just past the light ship at Port Huron, and we're just starting to make our turn up under the Blue Water Bridge. You're going to see the sailboat come into frame here in a second, and you'll see that he is pointed towards the Canadian side, but because of the strong current in the area, and he's not using his engine, he is setting. Remember, the difference between the heading and the course over ground is the set. So he is setting way to the south. So his course over ground is really going towards the American side, and you can see that in this video. So here he comes. As you can tell by the picture, the chart that I put up, there is nowhere for me to go. I have two choices. I either try to dodge him and go around him and make our way safely up under the bridge, or I can run aground or into the seawall. Those are really my options. So you can see now just from the way he's pointed over towards the Canadian side. So you can see the bow is pointed over towards the Canadian shore here. He's trying to get out of the way, but he's misjudged the current in the area, and he's actually setting down onto the US side. So as per the rule for narrow channels, I believe it's rule number 9, because we're in this area, sailing vessels must give way to commercial traffic or larger ships like us. Now you can see he's starting to get a little bit worried, and he'll start turning more and more and more up towards the Canadian side there. See, there he goes. So you see, he's trying to get out of the way, and he's trying to stay onto the Canadian side of the channel. But the current has got him at this point. So his best course of action here would have been to haul over to starboard, turn to starboard, and go down towards the US side, and then come back around after I've gotten out of his way. Now, he is under sail here, so as he turns more and more and more to port, he's losing speed, which means the current's affecting him even more. Now, in this video, I don't have the sound on while I'm recording this, but in this video, I gave him 5 short blasts, and then later on, I gave him like 2 or 3. I meant to give him 5, but I got distracted by someone telling me something else in the wheelhouse. There's about 5 or 6 of us in the wheelhouse right now, And actually, my friend Gary, if you watch the fire video about the 2023 Cuyahoga fire, Gary, who was the cadet recording everything for me throughout the fire, he was actually wheelsman at this time, and he was steering. Now, Gary saved the day here a little bit later, and I'll get into that. But as I was giving the second round of 5 short, there was someone, and I don't remember what this person wanted, but they came up and grabbed me, and I had to deal with something pretty immediate there. So you can see at this stage now, he's getting very, very nervous. And where the ship was at this stage, coming around the turn, I couldn't go more to starboard. This was as far starboard as I could go without running the ship aground. Now, if he had gone to starboard rather than to port here, trying to stay on the Canadian side, if he had gone to starboard, he would have been absolutely fine. There would have been no problem. So you see now they kind of realized what their problem was, and they've turned the sailboat down to the US side. Now, I think that they should have done this earlier. I think they may have misjudged the current in the area, and they thought that they would have been able to get out of the way. But obviously that was not the case. Yeah, I don't like this part. So you see here, I didn't see him at this point. I had no visual on the boat itself. All I saw was about that much, about 1.5 feet of the mast go by the windows. I think I sent somebody over to the bridge wing to see if we hit him, but he told me that we missed him by about 6 feet. Yeah, that's about the closest call I've ever had on a Laker. So at this stage here, after we got by him, I'm still in the turn, right? This is a long, gradual turn coming up under the Blue Water Bridge. And because of the way ships turn, there's a pivot point. There's one point on the vessel that it rotates around in the water. As the vessel moves ahead, that pivot point moves from the center of the underwater area towards the bow. And it usually ends up being about 1/3 of the way from the bow. So the rest of the ship sticking out past the pivot point, so the other 400 feet, swings around. Now, the best way I can describe it is a car drifting. If you've ever watched a car drifting, you know that it rotates around the front 2 wheels, and the back wheels spin and slide around, and the back of the car slides out. That's pretty much how a ship turns. Now, I knew that I was close to this sailboat, and I knew that we passed them by about 6 feet. And I also knew that I was partway through the turn, and that stern was still swinging across. Now, I didn't want the stern to swing across and grab them after we got by the front part of the ship there. So what I did is I ordered hard to port to steady the ship up. So I've just made everybody that knows anything about the Blue Water Bridge turn cringe by saying hard to port. The reason is, to make this turn on a cargo vessel, how everybody is taught is once you start turning, you never want to stop that rotation. You can speed it up or slow it down depending on where you are in the channel and what you need, but you never want to stop it, and you definitely don't want to start going to port. The reason for that is there is so much water coming down off of Lake Huron into the river that if you stop that rotation, it's very hard to get it going again. And also, if you have rotation to port now, the opposite direction of the turn, you've now got to stop that momentum and then fight the current to get the ship to come back over to starboard. Gary saves the day here. So I order hard to port, and you can see the ship, the Cuyahoga, starts turning to port. Now, what I'm trying to do is swing that stern away from the sailboat. Now, here comes Gary's saving moment here. So as I'm trying to swing the stern away, Gary calls me as I'm watching the sailboat to make sure that it's safe to continue back on the turn. And he says, "Hey, Cap, rudder's still hard to port." Now, this is really bad because, like I said, we're turning to port now, and that's a big no-no for this turn or anyone that's ever done it. So Gary said to me, he was steering. Gary said, "Hey Cap, rudder's still hard to port." And then it clicked into me that we're rotating to port now. We need to recover from this and go back to starboard. So you'll see here in a second, we'll stop turning to port, and then we'll start turning to starboard. That was Gary. Gary did that. So you can see we got a pretty good rate of turn to port going on, and it took a very long time for it to come off, but we did get it back. Now, had the ship been loaded, or a larger ship, we may not have been able to recover the way that we did. So Gary did a great thing for us, and he saved the day for us on that one. And there we go. All right, so that's what happened. So afterwards, what had happened was I didn't personally get a call from the Coast Guard, but the office, the Lower Lakes Towing Office, was contacted by the U.S. Coast Guard, and they said, I did a great job avoiding that sailboat, but they wanted me to fill out some paperwork regarding a near miss. And the person that they called, who is now retired, very correctly told them that if they wanted a near miss for this report, that's fine. But if we had to do one every time something like this happened, they would have to double their personnel in the U.S. Coast Guard in order to handle all the reports. And he's not wrong. So things like this happen all the time. And that's one of many reasons why I did the video last week about sailboats not always having the right of way. In these rivers, commercial traffic has right of way. And that's it. So the Code of Federal Regulations in the USA, they say that small vessels have to keep out of the way of commercial traffic. Transport Canada has the COLREGs, and the COLREGs say the same thing. So the CFR and the COLREGs, they both say the same thing about the same area. So no matter where you are in the Detroit, St. Clair River, St. Mary's River, anywhere in the inland waters except for the open lake, just stay out of the way. All right, so I know there's going to be a couple of people thinking this, but why did I go to starboard and not to port? Well, you could see from the motion of that sailboat, it was moving towards the American side. So if I'd gone to port to avoid the sailboat, I would have been steering into his path rather than trying to stay out of his path. Because I knew, well, as I was watching him, that no matter which way he pointed that sailboat, he was making his way over to the U.S. shore. Now, it's irresponsible for me to try and go around him that way when he would just drift into me. Another reason why I didn't go to port is pretty much everywhere in the COLREGs and in the CFR for avoiding collisions, they all say avoid going to port to avoid a collision. So naturally, my first instinct is always to go to starboard. So in this case, going to starboard meant staying out of the path of the sailboat. So he was going towards the U.S. shore, so I'd stay out of his path. And also, it is the recommended maneuver to avoid a collision.